Come on, I'm unmuted.
Cliff, are we ready for traffic? We're broadcasting now.
We're broadcasting. Okay. Ta-da-da. Okay. Is everybody reasonably ready?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Kelly ready? Well, Kelly was
I'm
having
ready.
a problem. Are you ready?
No, I'm good. He told me to turn it off and turn it on. It just like I hate that answer.
Plug it in.
This is all good problems.
And I know he's laughing at me.
Good evening, and welcome to the 4:30 p.m. Board of Trustees work session. We're having a work session tonight because at our last regularly scheduled Board of Trustees meeting, there were power problems all over the village. So we delayed the work session to tonight when there is an AP meeting, a minor items meeting directly after the work session. I need a motion to open the work session.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Wait, is everybody here?
Yeah?
Yeah.
The gang's all here. Now, I would entertain a motion to go into executive session if somebody wants to make that.
Yes, I'll bring a motion to enter executive session to discuss matters leading to the appointment of persons to the Ad Hoc Ethics Code Review Committee. And we would be going into executive session under section 105(1)(f).
Second.
Augie, please call roll.
Trustees Winstrup,
Yes.
Natchez,
Yes.
Lucas,
Yes.
DeFore,
Yes, and just to clarify, we're not going into the other matter that's on the agenda, right? The Goldstein matter is not.
Correct.
Right.
Aye. Okay, I'll see you in executive session.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, sugar. You know, you're not, that's what killed us.
1 second, Tom. Let me just mute everybody, including us. You're unmuted.
The screen.
We're getting rid of the screen share.
Pardon me. Can I see the, you know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
That, yeah. Make it bigger.
It's too big.
Way too big. Okay. What's going on here? Can't see the rest of it.
No, they're on top.
Can we get them down by?
I'm gonna have that in a second.
We got 1 second here. We got a little technical thing.
Can you please stop this screen share? Thank you.
Who's that? Cliff? Cliff. You broke my heart, Cliff.
So who on this thing?
Doesn't end well after that.
Okay. The gang all here?
Yes, the trustees are all here. The manager's here, the attorney.
Christie?
Christie's there, Dan's there.
Okay. Good evening. We've just come out of executive session. In executive session, we took no votes, but we did decide that the folks who have sent in their resumes currently for the Ad hoc Ethics Code Revision Committee will be appointed in the September meeting. So we will take a vote on it then. But if you're watching and you and sent in a resume, you will be barring unforeseen circumstances. And we are looking for one more member. If someone else wants to be on the Ad hoc Ethics Code Revision Committee, please contact the village clerk treasurer's office, Sally Roberts. That's S Roberts at VOMNY.org. Once again, that email is S Roberts at VOMNY.org. Okay, now we're going to resume with the regular meeting. Who's in the attendees?
Galaxy 820 and Susan.
Okay. The first item on the agenda, I think, Kelly, you talked with Shannon, and she wants to be held over to September meeting?
Yeah, there was some confusion about whether this was on the agenda for tonight or not. And September, she'll have time to prepare. I've told her, we'll try to put her first on the agenda. And she asked how much time she had. I said, there's no limit, but be reasonable. And she left. So I think we'll have a good presentation then, and we're good.
Okay.
I guess we have to decide at the work session to put it on for the regular session, right? I mean, that's probably what we should do.
Yeah, it's just, I thought we were going to have her present at the work session.
No, I just we hadn't discussed it and I didn't want to drop it. So that's why.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
So is 5 o'clock okay with everybody still?
Next, to her come to the work session?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, is it easier for her to come to a regular session? I mean, I think she's back at her office. I don't care. Just.
I don't know. I know that 5 works for her. If the consensus is we should change her and put her on the regular meeting, I'll reach out.
No, I want to have a discussion about what we're actually going to do.
Good, thanks.
And, you know, before we, you know, I mean, I want to do it, but I just, you know,
Yeah.
I want to know what the parameters are here.
Yep.
I think one thing that we should do is reference the resolutions for both the St. Patrick's Day parades and the fire parades, because there's, you know, we kind of have a formula there where we know what the village does and we know what the organizations do, and that might be a good way of making sure that we're treating everybody fairly.
Well, yeah, what I also want to talk about is, you know, usually it's the parades have a committee that does most of the organizing and reaching out. I just want to make sure that is all in place.
Yes.
You know, okay.
Is it possible to get you to speak closer to the microphone?
I'll talk to the back of the room. Does that work?
That's better.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. We're always moving the mic.
And I also, this also came up at the Arts Council meeting. I guess that was 2 weeks ago. And if there is going to be, you know, a festival in the park, they might be interested in reaching out to some, you know, some appropriate arts organization to do a performance or a participatory activity.
Okay. All right. You know, I just want to jump ahead because tonight there's two people on the line and they asked for something. They're longtime village residents. They asked for something that is time sensitive. This is item 2A. Authorization to paint a Black Lives Matters mural on Grand Street. At the end of every summer, they usually have an end of summer party for the past 15 years that is held on Grand Street. This is by Papes Park, from Old White Plains Road over to the next street. Since they can't have the party that they used to having, they wanted to have an event to both bring the community together and kind of commemorate the times that we are in today. So in the course of asking for a permit for a block party, you know, and you know, the community residents have been explained and they totally understand and support the limitations of a block party currently. You can have one, but you have to keep it under 50. They thought that it would be a good project to kind of lead people through, have everybody do a portion of the mural. This is Miss Lavette Allen and Jared Winchester, who have been approaching us about this, and they want to do the party on September 26th with a rain date of September 27th. You know, we should leave it up to them and village staff about where on the block would be the best area to paint. But Jerry, I think rightly so, said that since they were going to be talking about painting a village street, that this should be something that the Board of Trustees should weigh in on. And I think it's a great idea.
Is it the street?
Grand Street.
What's the street?
The street from Old White Plains Road, the Grand, you know where Papes Park is there?
Yep.
It's that street.
Okay, to pay the entire street. Okay.
Spur. I forget the next street. The next, if you go down that street, keep going, you run into where Jerry lives.
Avalon.
The Avalon, yeah. And that is the street where they have historically had the end of summer party, the July 4th party.
So that actual street between Old White Plains Road and Grand Street is Madison.
Madison, yes. I'm sorry.
Madison.
I drew a blank there for a minute.
So what's exactly required from us?
It's just the permission to allow them to paint the street.
So it's kind of authorization. There'll be a resolution prepared.
Yeah, I wanted to put it on the agenda for the first meeting in September. That's why I wanted to talk about it tonight.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that okay with everybody?
Sure. Yes.
Okay. Then we will put this on the agenda for what's the first meeting in September?
14th.
We will put this on the agenda for the September 14th meeting. And then our residents can, hold on one second, one of them's texting me. Our residents can go about, Jared's correcting me. It's Madison. Thank you. Thank you, Jared.
That's why I was asking, because it says authorization to paint a mural, and now we're talking about the street. So which is the two, or what is it that it's been painted? The agenda talks about a mural. We were just talking about painting the street.
No, this is on the street. They'll be painting the mural on the street,
Okay.
okay? All right, we can have,
On Madison Street.
on Madison Street, we can have
Madison.
going off, write up a resolution.
Mhm.
Does that give them enough time?
Yes, we talked about it. They thought that would be fine.
Okay.
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 Thank you all very much. Jerry, thank you for
Yeah.
helping me with this.
Sure. My pleasure.
Thank you. Now let's get back to the yellow, back to, we're not going to talk about the comprehensive plan tonight, right?
No.
But I think we need to make a date to have a special meeting about it.
Let me look it up.
Yeah. Would folks be willing to do it during the, I have a vacation coming up. Want to do it during the day?
When are you talking about?
I think my vacation is the week of the 17th, but I'm going away like the 19th, 20th, and 21st. So maybe the 17th or the 18th?
So in September.
In September, yeah.
The 18th is not a good day for me, but the 17th would be okay.
You could start early, maybe?
Sorry, no, I have conflict. I work. I have
Yeah.
Thursday and that Friday I have a retreat. Yes.
Well, we're talking Monday.
Monday, the 21st, as you're saying?
I'm going away from the 19th.
Oh, right.
So
We do in the afternoon, later in the afternoon, like this time,
Yeah, whatever works.
5.
17th?
you're saying Monday, September 21st.
No, I'm saying Monday. I think, but no, whatever.
But you're going away when?
Oh, hold on, I'm looking at the wrong week.
Okay. Well,
I'm sorry.
Okay.
How about September 14th?
That's our Board of Trustees meeting,
Yeah.
starting early.
yeah, we can't do that.
Oh, okay. How about September 21st?
5 p.m.
Does that
I
work?
thought you're not going to be gone, Tom?
No, I know I'm going from Wednesday, and so I must be going, I'll have to check. I'm not going on the Monday, I know that.
But Monday, the 21st works?
I think so.
Okay.
You called it.
Or Tuesday. I mean, there's a flood mitigation committee. There's a flood meeting at the Tuesday, the 22nd.
Yeah.
Tuesday's no good.
All right.
So
So maybe,
is Monday the best day for everybody?
yeah.
I think it's good for me.
So do you want to try like 4 or 5?
5, please.
Victor just put a 5.
Try and do it like from 5 to 7.
Okay.
And we should check with our planner to make sure that's good for him.
I think that's a good idea. Jerry, can you check with Neil to say?
Yeah,
And and Mr. Long too.
September 21st.
Yes, please.
Okay. On our amended schedule that we discussed last time, we were going to have final on September 14th. So we'll just push it back a couple of meetings.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah, I found, I'm going away the 23rd to the 25th. Okay, I'm fine.
The 23rd to the 25th,
Fine, I just found out when I'm going away.
but you're home on Monday, the 21st.
Okay.
Okay.
And I'm off that week, so.
Okay.
Okay.
5 to 7 p.m. And I'll talk to Neil and William.
Great. Okay.
Somebody's looking at my schedule. Proposed local law to waive recreation fees for all affordable developments. We don't have this law fixed yet, do
Well,
No.
maybe.
Well, no, but the problem was the table, and I worked on the table and I sent it. So maybe somebody can share. I can't share the screen. It's on a different computer. But
It's
I
up.
think,
We just put it up.
okay, thanks.
That's what you sent, right? This one?
Yes, yes.
Uh,
Oh, I should have used bigger print. Sorry.
yeah. Well, you go into your space a little bit.
Sure.
So Nora, I think
Also-
your information is consistent with what I sent Bob. I did send him an email after our last meeting.
Okay.
And so I thought he had made some changes to his chart.
No, we still have the version that's 7/14, dated July 14th.
No.
So if we did, we just don't have the updated one.
No, that's the last version I have.
Okay.
But I'm not sure what the
Neither mind. The
30%
30%.
and
So-
50% is.
Yeah.
So I added a column, which was actually the percentage of affordability, which had been in just the second item. So we talked about rental unit in which maximum yearly rent, including utilities, does not include 30% of the 60%. So I was trying to figure out how we got to the formulas of you pay 75% of the fee or 50% of the fee or 25% of the fee or 0% of the fee. And I'm not sure I have it right. I was just trying to get a framework that got us to those graduated percentages.
I think, Nora, if you took out, from my point of view, if you took out the 30% of and just said 80%, 75, 60%, 50, 50%, 25, and 40% or below, 0.
Like that?
Yeah, because,
Um,
do you know what I mean?
No, I'm not following that, but I'm sorry, maybe I'm missing something.
Okay.
I mean, so
No.
we have to figure out what the percentage of AMI is being paid.
Right.
So we were trying to figure out which was the deepest one. And I also, as an aside, it doesn't matter whether it's rental or whether it's for sale, because it's only going to be at the initial phase. So it would be the same percentages.
Okay. No,
Except that the code doesn't now define anything other than fair and affordable housing or fair and deeply affordable housing.
Right.
And the numbers with respect to purchases are not the same as the rental numbers.
okay. Wait, can we just hold on for 1 second? What this all has to do with, right, is all affordable units in a building with all affordable units. So if the builder decides that it's all going to be 80%, right, then he pays 75% of the fee.
Right.
If he has a
Yes.
mix of it, depending upon the mix, he pays that per unit.
yes.
Right.
So I don't, the 30% of is what's really confusing here. From the degree of affordability, if you call that percentage of AMI,
Because that's how, Mayor, that's how we define affordability. 30% of 80% of AMI is what makes it affordable. And 30% of 50% of AMI makes it deeply affordable.
well, what do you mean 30% of what?
30% of whatever 80% of AMI. So let's say AMI, just for picking an easy number, AMI were $100,000, right? The fair and affordable housing number would be 30% of 80% of $100,000 or 30% of $80,000. That's how it's defined in the code.
Right.
Would it be easier to, I just sent everyone the email that I sent Bob after our last meeting, which I just went back to my notes and it was, when we said 80% of AMI, they pay 75%, 60% of AM, it's what Nora has in her thing, but it's just in a simple chart. And I think it is confusing to say 30% of 80%.
Yes.
Can we instead use language like, I know that when they market the units, the maximum income is 80% of AMI. And when they market the units to another level, it's 60% AMI. They're marketing to that segment. People have, 60% AMI. And then they market to, fair and deeply affordable, 40% AMI.
Right.
So can we
Right.
describe it in those terms instead of a percent of a percent?
Right.
You could, but then you would be, either you have to redo how you define what a fair and affordable housing unit, or you're going to have a difference between what qualifies as a fair and affordable housing unit and what gets you relief from the recreation fee.
Yeah.
So
Right.
what Kelly is proposing is reflected in this chart. Bob, would you say that?
Yes, except we would have to create, we could certainly do this chart. It doesn't address rental, sale units. But we can certainly do this, just like I created, you see how the chart in the draft law, the first category is fair and affordable rental housing unit, because that's defined. We know what that is under the code. The 30% of 50% of 60% is not in the code as a definition. So we had to spell that out. We
Yeah.
could spell out another one that says 30% of 50%. Well, hold on. What's a fair and deeply affordable? Fair and deeply affordable is
0.
30% of 40%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'd have to create another interim category, 30% of 50%. And yes, that can be, there's no question that can be done. You'd be creating, two separate categories that aren't in the code already as fair and affordable housing unit, but you can do that if you want for the purposes of this.
Bob, if I may. Hello, am I muted? No. Hello,
We can hear you.
if I may, okay. Let's continue with Bob's table, and then we can fix it based on, I think Nora has captured the discussion that we had a couple times, but let's actually work from Bob's table, because Bob's table has two categories that are almost that would work and are in line with the code. Essentially, we already have two defined terms in the code, and we should use those to the extent possible. We don't need to reinvent those. And those are the first one in the table, which is fair and affordable. Remove rental, because whether it's rental or whether it's going to be for sale, that's the point where they will have to decide what the fee is. So actually, I think that the reference of 30%, of 40, of 80 was just, I think, to keep track of what the board was trying to do. But we don't need to add that to confuse, because actually that's in the definition. So if you just say fair and affordable housing unit, 75%, that would be correct. I think that's in line with what we discussed and with the table where Nora is trying to say that. And actually, we should be consistent along the law. The law sometimes says fair and affordable residence uses, fair and affordable residence uses. We should be using fair and affordable housing units, or fair and deeply affordable housing units, because that's the second term defined. So the first one is if you remove the word rental, should work.
Yep.
Coming down there, the second one would be fair and affordable housing unit, but because it's not 30 of 80, you would need to say it's fair and affordable housing unit, but you would distinguish that this one is 30 of 60.
Okay.
So it's the second category of fair and affordable housing unit, and you can define it either in the same place or in the column. Then the third one, which is in the next page, it's fair and deeply affordable remove rental housing unit. That is 0, should be at the bottom of the table, right? And then we're left with another one that we don't have defined, which is fair and deeply affordable, being 30 of 50, I would say, and then that one pays 25. So
Okay.
you just need,
I'm sorry.
Go
You
ahead.
don't qualify those fair and deeply affordable because you got to get to 30 or 40 to be fair and deeply affordable. So we
Okay,
should
then you'll have to,
affordable.
then you'll have to,
30,
then it will
50.
be fair and affordable
Yeah,
at that rate.
that's fine.
So so you just be consistent with the definition we have, and in two places, you'll just write the different proportion. I think that would work.
Yep.
And make it in section 1 and section 2 that we're talking about fair and affordable
Bob,
housing units, because we have families, we have a lot of definitions.
Bob,
Okay.
can
That captures it.
have this on a work session for September, and we'll also put it on to schedule a public hearing at the
Yeah.
meeting.
Okay.
We'll do
so-
it.
Does that,
The only problem with that is that with regard to a sale unit, right? Fair and affordable housing, a fair and affordable housing unit and a fair and deeply affordable housing unit are defined exactly the same. That's
You're right.
2.5% of 80, 2.5
80.
times
Right.
80%. So
Okay.
what applies?
so why don't we add a category for sale then? Because it only matters in the very beginning. It wouldn't matter if the unit is re-rented or resold. So should we have separate categories for rental and then for sale?
Sales. Yeah. We have to.
Why would we be waiving the fees if it was for sale?
Because it's being sold to lower income families.
No, are you talking about a resale, Dan, or just a straight out sale?
I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
So to try and answer Dan's question, this only applies when the building is constructed. So whether
I
they're
understand.
right. So whether the unit is sold at an affordable rate or whether it is rented at an affordable rate, depending on how deep the affordability is what that one-time recreation fee is.
Right. The idea is to spur the developers to build these types of units. It's not to give, it doesn't give a boom to the person who's buying it.
Philosophically, I'm not sure that I'm overly comfortable with the sale aspect of it.
Why?
The rental aspect usually connotes a higher turnover, which keeps deeply affordable units, more available to the public.
The idea of this,
And I think that's what we're trying to do here.
what we're trying to do is to spur the development of these units so that
Tom, you either got to speak louder or go closer. I'm sorry, I'm not hearing you.
The idea behind it is to spur development of these units so that it would be more attractive to a developer. This isn't about, the poor person buying a home. We want to have these homes available for poor people to buy. For people.
I understand. So the conceptual question is, what are we trying to promote?
We're trying to promote the building of all affordable units.
If we're trying to promote building of all affordable units, and I'm on the end of the scale of the deeply affordable units, I'm more concerned about having them built for rental than for sale. That takes them out of the deeply affordable units very quickly.
How does that take them out of deeply affordable units? I mean, I think the sale of affordable housing is a really underserved market. I mean, and if we can find a way for people to get into homes that they own, I think that's, it's great.
I think that's a point well taken, Kelly. I think that it's been very hard for people of limited means to buy homes and to develop equity and then to have equity to pass upon to future generations, which is how the middle class got built in this country.
Yep.
We had laws for years and years that wouldn't allow banks to loan to certain people and neighborhoods to get loans to certain people. So people went hundreds of years without the ability to build up equity. I think that, I don't want to just limit it to rentals, because then you're telling, a whole segment of population that they're not going to have the ability to have that American dream, which is to have a home and to have something that you can call yours. And when you have something that's yours and you own it, it promotes better citizenship, and it promotes taking care of the community better. And you feel more a part of the community, especially in the suburbs, where the whole goal to be a homeowner. I've talked to many kids over the years who were embarrassed to bring friends home to their homes because they were renting and they didn't own a home, because that's the goal around here, right? It connotes something else around here when you're renting.
We have a table for rental that I think we all agree on.
Mhm.
Then we will have to craft a law for discussion. Unfortunately, we didn't discuss the two pieces sufficiently earlier. We would need to come up with a table for sales. And I would start, I don't know why do we have exactly the same 2.5 of 80% for both, if we really wanted to distinguish them. So that requires a little bit of research, how to develop that table.
Well, I think realistically, there aren't sales of homes going to people making less than 80% AMI. It just doesn't happen.
Well, maybe not in Westchester.
No, you couldn't come near buying a house for that around here, or an apartment or anything.
Right.
I
So
don't
it's a very tiny, limited market. And if someone wanted to build a housing complex that had all purchasable, fair and affordable units in it, I don't know why we would discourage that by not giving them the break on the recreation fund fee.
And it's not giving them the break. It's giving the
The
developer
developer,
to incentivize.
that's what I said, discourage someone who wants to build this.
And I don't know why we would try and penalize people from owning homes.
I just think we need to
Good
figure out
points.
how to describe what
Disincentive.
that breakdown is going to be. Because we figured it out for rental, but we haven't figured it out for sales.
Why can't it be the same?
If you were selling to the 80, to the deepest affordable housing, then I guess I wouldn't be objecting. But beyond that, it's an incentive that I don't think that we need to do. I think the real incentive is to try and reach out to encourage, to a area that is not well funded. So if you're talking about a fee that has to be paid, which is the incentive for the developer to do something, then you should be doing it for what the area that you are most concerned about. And if you're saying you don't care, then I have a problem.
No, wait. I'm here and I proposed this law because I care deeply. So to
I'm sorry, Tom, I can't hear you. I'm sorry, I can't.
say somebody doesn't care is an absurdity, and it's a red herring. And I really take umbrage at that. Somebody making $75,000, a single mother with 2 children, would be in the 80%. Try living around here with 2 kids for $75,000.
So I think what we have to figure, I think to Dan's point, we have graduated we've incentivized the most deeply affordable. I think what we need to figure out is, and Victor's correct, we have the same degree of affordability, 2 times 80% of AMI for the sales price. That's the original sales price. That would also be a subsequent sales price. So it would be factored in the sale. So if you buy one of these units, you're not going to build the kind of equity that you would build if you just bought a house with none of these constraints or controls. So we have to figure out how to equate the sale price within the same kind of a schedule that we've done.
Why not just make it the same?
No, I think there's a distinction in the code that may help us. you see the distinction is, the proportion is the same, 2.5, 2.2 times 5
2.5 times.
times of 80. But the difference is what type of family it applies to, because there is a definition in the first one, in fair and affordable, it's a fair and affordable family. And in the second one, it is a fair and deeply affordable housing family. And those definitions are different.
Yeah,
I think what we're trying to get to is that the incentive should go to the to any unit sold deeply fair and deeply affordable housing, because the definition is different in how the families are defined, and that's where the distinction is. Now I see it. One really takes into account what the family is making versus the other one. There's a distinction. And if I remember correctly, Greg was following this from Westchester, and he did a little bit of work engineering. So I think that's where the distinction comes in. So they are really different with the same proportion. So it is the deeply affordable that I think is
That's
what we're looking for.
graduated the fee reduction.
so,
It's not the same fee reduction.
so would
You want to give it?
would deeply, fair and deeply be 75%? And fair and affordable be the 50%? Would that be a fair?
Would you do it
Would
the
that
other way
be,
around?
would that more closely relate to the tentative things we've set for rentals?
Well, if you're doing a fair and deeply affordable housing unit, rental unit at 0,
Okay, oh, sorry, yeah, okay, sorry.
why
Yeah.
would you not treat a fair and deeply affordable
Right.
sale unit?
So
the
maybe
same
it would
way.
be 0 and 75. Is that
And
equitable?
And a fair and affordable is 75, yeah.
Do we think they relate to the rental prices?
And it will work with the definitions.
Yeah.
Yes, and then we just
0,
added a
75.
middle road,
Mm-hmm.
which was the 50% of the fee paid if you're at 60% of AMI, because these developments tend to have a mix of housing. I don't think when you're talking about a 100% affordable building with purchasable units that they have a mix. I think it's just at the 80%, which would be a 75% recreation fee.
Yeah.
80% AMI. I don't
I
think
think we need to do a little research and figure out how to set a fair one for the sale price that correlates with what we've figured out for the rentals.
So how about, 50% and 75%?
Well, 75% and 0 would correlate to the definitions of fair and affordable housing.
Yeah,
And fair and deeply affordable
Okay.
housing
and
family.
it's really an incentive.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
the whole point of this is to
Okay.
incentivize.
Correct.
I can go with that. Bob, can you get that ready for next meeting?
Sure.
And then for the sale units, we're really only incentivizing the very deeply affordable ones. We're not incentivizing.
No, we're doing 75% and 0.
we're just
Right, but I mean, we're not doing the ones that are at like a 50%.
No.
that's right. We're skipping them for whatever reason.
I
Yeah.
think that would get very complicated definitionally if we tried to do that.
Okay, so
Okay.
if you're building all affordable and they're at 80% AMI, you get a 75%, you pay 75%.
No, I think what Victor said is, it's not just the AMI. Our two definitions for sale units have to do with the financial qualifications for the families.
Right.
Okay, so you want to do 75% and 0% qualifications. Victor, you saying yes?
Yeah, that's how, and even Bob, I think that's what Bob is saying. It just follows the code. And then it's another, you could probably do 2 tables, maybe look straight out.
Yeah, I'll look at it, see which makes it clearer.
Okay. At least we have some consensus.
Thanks.
Right.
Okay.
Next item, formation of a committee to study year-round recreation in the village. Kelly?
Sure. This is what the ad hoc tennis committee recommended, that we get on this and try to study whether the courts should be moved, whether we should include something like an indoor soccer field or a playing field for another sport. The idea was to include some tennis committee members and some other members of the community who are interested in other sports. This is to investigate where and how to go about recommending that the village, put out an RFP or, consider having something like this as a resource for both recreation year round and for revenue.
I think this is definitely a topic we need to discuss, but I'm wondering why we don't ask the Rec and Parks Committee to talk about that.
Well, I think we're trying to just have a very focused, separate committee, and I think members of the Rec and Park Committee who want to participate on that should be encouraged to apply and be part of that separate ad hoc committee. I mean, it's just trying to combine interests of tennis committee members, and I assume it would be recreation committee members who might be interested, but there might be someone from the soccer league who's not on the rec committee, or someone from lacrosse or little league who isn't on the rec committee.
Or a senior citizen who has different.
Well, I think if we're going to do this, we really need to make sure that the Recreation and Parks Committee has input.
Yeah.
Has a
There's some, I think there's a strong, whatever the case, it has to be a strong link with the rec committee, or have it as sub, because of all the work that kind of coordinates through there.
I know.
Having the two going separate could really,
No, I don't think they should go separate. I think we should have members of the rec committee who want to serve on this be involved. I think, this is, we
Right.
ended the tennis committee meeting work, and their, desire was to continue on this route and add more voices to the discussion. So, but to do that, I think we need a separate ad hoc committee that can take what the tennis committee studied and what they learned and move on with it. Because they did get information about multi-sport indoor facilities.
So maybe it needs to be a combination of some of the members from the ad hoc tennis committee, some of the members from the Rec and Parks Commission, and then just some members from diverse parts of the community.
Yep.
Again, a little wider group.
Yep. That's who I imagine would
How many
be
members were on the tennis committee ultimately? It was like
7, 9.
I think it was 9.
9. So if we had 2 from tennis, 2 from rec, and 3 from the rest of the 3 from the rest of the 3 or 5 from the rest of the committee. I mean, the rest of the 3 or 5 from the rest of the village.
I think that would be great. I think that we shouldn't limit it. I think we should just collect the resumes, see who's interested, and then when we discuss them, if we want to strike that kind of balance in making the appointments, we can.
The key is how to make the coordination work. So as long as for example, the rec committee is coordinating it, I feel fine. What I don't want is things going in separate ways. And I actually don't work in those committees, but I just see that it's very, very much in the core mission of the rec committee and how well they work.
By the same token, Victor, you could say it's in the core mission of the tennis committee. I'm trying to create something that just brings them together.
Right, so
Well,
fold that one in to the rec and form it, but have the rec committee coordinate it or lead it. So come up with something like that would work.
I think that's going to create like a hydra that won't get anything done. I think we want people who are interested in this specific topic to meet, to work with what the tennis committee learned, like come up to speed on that and work together in a new committee that can study this for the village and make recommendations. But I think if you try to make it a part of the rec committee, it's too big. It will lose focus and nothing will get done. That's my worry.
I don't agree that nothing would happen, but my concern is that this whole thing started with what are we going to do about year-round tennis? And we have a clock that's ticking with an extension. And all I see is that another year is going to go by and we're going to be in the same boat and not come to a conclusion. An RFP takes a year to get done out and finished. So I think that's, I think we have to decide what is the biggest priority.
But to Kelly's point, this is about having a wider ranging discussion with people in the community to try and get input. And I don't know why we'd be against that. That seems to me like, what our core mission is here, right? Is to give people an opportunity to weigh in. And, the rec committee, having been on the rec committee for a number of years, they do a lot of nuts and bolts. And, they do a lot of good work, but, there's a lot to decide, who gets what field and stuff like that.
Well, I have to say, as the liaison, I know that they're very interested in this.
Can I finish?
So,
I was hoping that this would be a committee that would look at it more in a philosophical vein about, an overview instead of a nuts and bolts. Go ahead, Nora.
no, I mean, I think the rec committee is very interested. I think they would have liked more participation in the tennis committee, and I think they're very interested in figuring out ways to get, more sports available to a wide range of village residents. So I think, I think as long as the tennis, I think the tennis committee and the rec committee both have experience and interests in pursuing this. And so I think if members of both of those committees are working with a wider range of people from the village, and I think not to give more work to Jason, but I think Jason needs to be involved because he's really the person who's got a lot of the practical experience.
Yep.
I think that would be, I think that might move us to a better place, but we have to figure out how to get to a place where we're ready to figure out what to do. And we haven't made that much. I mean, 2020 has not been the year of progress.
No. So can I just ask that we move this resolution forward and that we form the committee and that we get some resumes? I think we're all generally on the same page that we want some tennis committee members, some rec committee members, some members from the larger community, so that we can get the committee formed.
We don't have a resolution in front of us. We have the tennis one. We don't have.
Yeah, we don't have a resolution.
Jess?
We have a resolution.
No.
You know what? I did send one in.
That's why probably.
This is not it. The wrong one was included in the packet. I'm sorry.
That's probably why we're all probably
Wrong one.
still on the wrong. Yes.
Yep.
We're not on the same page, so that's why.
All right.
Well, let's circulate that.
Well,
and
let's, can you send it?
Yeah, I'm going to look for it.
we'll pick it up next time. Now we'll. Okay.
Kelly, how many people were you considering putting on it?
I don't know, 7, 9.
What I was going to suggest is 3 people from tennis, 3 people from parks, and 3 people from someplace other than those 2 entities.
I think that would make sense. Assuming we would get 9 resumes, we see what happens. We have these aspirations and.
Yeah, and we might. There are other people who are interested in what's going on. So maybe even I think we need to be flexible. It should be a mix of people from the tennis committee, the Parks and Rec committee, and diverse sections of the community.
All right, Kelly, let's put it on the work session for September.
Yep.
We at least know where we're going here.
Okay.
Yep. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that this didn't get this wrong resolution.
It's been a rough couple of weeks.
Yes, it has. Okay.
License agreement with Brixville. Bob? You're muted, Bob. You're muted.
Got it. This is basically an update of this agreement with Brixmore. Since you approved the last agreement, they added some bollards in order to protect the transformer that is directly adjacent to this license area. and they wanted the agreement to reflect the installation of those bollards. And they also wanted some clarifying language on responsibility for maintenance, both while the license agreement is in place and if the license agreement is ever terminated. So that's what this does.
So these are those stanchions that they put in front of electrical apparatus and gas apparatus so cars don't back into them?
That's right.
So on the first, on A1 maintenance, there's maintaining the plantings to the reasonable satisfaction of the village manager. Is that something new? Sorry, Mr. Manager, but they're giving you here more.
That's
They're
a-
giving you here more work here.
That's in the existing agreement.
It's red line here.
Oh, you know what? It's both in the red line and in the not red line.
Oh, okay.
But typically, you know, the village manager doesn't have to exercise, doesn't have to go out and inspect it himself. But typically, we leave these judgments when we do these agreements to the village manager rather than to some other
Okay.
officer of the village.
Okay, I just see it. Okay, I see how, now I understand. Okay.
Mhm.
This will commence when? Upon execution? It has
Yeah.
a July 15th. I guess it's.
Yes. It was drafted a while ago, but it's because it's been on a couple of agendas. But as of July, as of when it's signed, we'll put the date for when it's signed.
Was there the other day? I think the area and the ramp looks clean. We are sure that it's ADA compliant.
I put up the guardrail, I saw that.
It was, you know, the building inspector and the village engineer
Okay.
last year said it was fine.
Well, let me
Yeah.
weigh in on that. I'm not sure that it is, but we'll take it at face value. But if somebody complains to the Justice Department and the Justice Department determines that it's not, that becomes a village liability. So I would like, there are several things that are missing in this agreement. In the paragraph numbered 1, on the second line, installed it should be an ADA compliant railing along with the required ADA compliant concrete walk. In addition to that, I have notes of an addition, but I can't find out where it goes, but you can, it's in the maintenance section. The following should be on a daily basis, remove all debris, keep area free, clear from weeds and in good shape, including I can't remember. Hold on, I'm reading. Yeah, it had to do with in shrubs in good condition, including those that have been impaired or have died. There's nothing in the maintenance agreement that requires that, Bob, and that I find that troublesome. What really bothers me is for a year, I've been asking for the concrete that was dumped on the Mamaroneck Avenue side of Leicester and had gravel put over it be removed, and it's not. They do not police the area. You know, I go down there and I pick up all sorts of debris. It should be done on a daily basis. It shouldn't be the village's responsibility. I also have a problem that if you go to the exhibits, or second exhibit, I can find it. Just a minute. Exhibit, I think it's exhibit B, says, see note 1, there's no note.
But just so you understand, Dan, this exhibit is here just to identify the area. It's an enlarged piece of a site plan. This isn't the site plan, and note 1 has nothing to do with this agreement. It's just
You have it, Bob. I understand that. I don't know what note 1 is. I'm taking your word for it. It has nothing to do with it. But it's on there, and it's not, the note 1 doesn't show whatever it is.
but it doesn't, the exhibit is here merely for the purpose of defining the license area.
I
Now,
understand that.
second thing I would point out is, do you understand that Brixmor is under no obligation to do this? If the village doesn't give them a license, that doesn't affect their site plan. It also prevents the village from pouring its stormwater into their stormwater system. So that's why this may not be a perfect agreement for the village, because there's a negotiation going on
So
here.
you're saying we should just not sign something that doesn't, say what we've actually said should be done? I don't know.
No, I'm saying you should understand the risk
Not at all.
that they will walk away and take it out and just destroy it, make us redo our subsurface drainage, and solve our drainage problem another way. It's a negotiation. There's a risk here.
There was an understanding, unless I was not at the meeting, and I believe I was at the 2 meetings where this was discussed in depth, that maintain the thing. We don't talk about that. We define it in a way that does not talk about maintaining it on a daily basis. It's not, and so we need, these things
I will be happy to put it
should be there in there as a matter of course.
I will be happy to put it into the draft. Whether they agree to it or not, I can't tell you.
We can ask.
They'll
So,
agree to maintain it on a daily basis? That seems extreme. I mean, it's
It's
just
not extreme. Village polices its property on a daily basis.
Do we?
Oh, really? We sweep every sidewalk every day?
I can't hear a word you're saying, Tom.
Hey, do we sweep every sidewalk every day?
Not every sidewalk every day. The parks are done every day.
Okay.
Village Hall is done every day.
I think we could say properly maintained without, putting criteria on it that really is not normal.
Look, you guys, I'm very concerned about this, and you can either agree or disagree, and then
They didn't have.
I'm putting forth what I believe is extremely important, because otherwise we have problems. They built an ADA sidewalk on the west side, and then interrupted it so you can't have either an ADA compliant sidewalk or a non-ADA compliant sidewalk, with the gas sticking way out into the sidewalk.
I don't understand that.
That's the second time that this has been done in this village in the last year and a half.
Dan, can I ask you a couple of questions to see where I understand? I understand the piece of the ADA compliant, because actually that's kind of inherent there. So I agree with that. Regarding maintenance, are you talking about the first page, A1, where it says maintenance?
Yes, number 1 on page.
Okay.
On page.
Right, and there it says, will thereafter maintain, and that's where there's a discussion of maybe doing properly. And then it says, to the reasonable satisfaction of the building inspector.
I can't hear you.
It says to the reasonable satisfaction of the building inspector.
Yeah, but I'm talking, part of this whole agreement was landscaping. There's nothing in there that requires them to maintain the landscaping, except maybe by somebody construing it to be there.
Well, they have to maintain the plantings. And in the first part is to the reasonable satisfaction of the building inspector. And in the second new piece is to the reasonable satisfaction of the village manager. But there is there's an enforcement component. Doesn't that satisfy the concern?
We've had a previous license agreement in effect with similar language. The plants died and nobody did anything. Other plans that were on the approved plan were never put in. The exhibits that you're showing don't show what was approved to be put in, Bob.
If it's reasonable satisfaction of the village manager, would you, if they're consistent, would that help?
I can't hear, I'm sorry.
If we would make it to the reasonable satisfaction of the village manager, would that suffice? Make both
Why I love
judgments consistent.
Sorry, go ahead. Why I love Jerry's enthusiasm for plantings. It's taken a great deal of his effort to get minor stuff done. I don't think it should be done by that.
Who do you think should do it?
By agreement, you do it, you enforce the agreement, or you don't.
But who's satisfied with the maintenance or not? I mean, we have a proposed agreement that says,
You have a planning board that has approved a plan. It should be the building department that should be doing this, not the village manager.
so the building department should go out and see if the sidewalk is swept and the trees are maintained?
That's part of their responsibility, is to enforce site plans that have been approved in this village. No?
So you're thinking the code inspectors? I'm trying to understand who you want to keep this sidewalk to nowhere, in pristine condition so that we can have some better flood control in that neighborhood.
I believe if it were me, I would have the building department be doing it. That's their responsibility.
When you say the village
Yes.
manager,
Jerry's running too many things as it is.
go look at it.
He's getting bitten by mosquitoes and running the engineering department and taking care of paving. What's the rest of the village doing?
Actually, Dan, that's what it says. It says building inspector. Building inspector is the one that's supposed to, will be looking into this.
Who works for the village manager?
Yeah, works for me.
Does it?
Are we asking for a daily inspection by code enforcement to make sure that the area is clean? Because I can't commit to that. I could commit to a weekly.
That's not what I said.
Okay, all right, then, that's fine. If that's
Not what I
you
said.
I'm good.
The daily thing is what they should be doing.
Okay,
They have
I get that part.
people around. It doesn't take much for somebody to go out and take a quick walk and, do whatever has to be done and pick up the litter. So if I go down and see litter, I can call the code enforcement people and have them come down and issue a summons. That's not how it should be done, but that's how it could be done.
I really hope it never comes to that.
For 3 months, nobody did bupkas down there except me cleaning it up, despite repeated requests.
Mhm.
You have concrete that was poured there and dumped there months and months and months ago that's still there.
Okay. So, caveats, can we have this done? We put this on a regular session for September?
Yeah, I have just one question.
Okay.
And that is, I just want to make sure, and maybe this is a whole different, it's like apples to oranges. I assume Brixmore wants to go ahead with this. I want to make sure that they're compliant with their site plan, because I did not think that all of those all those parking spaces that are now used with parking carts were part of the original site plan. And I think that's something that we should make sure is correct.
Okay, but that's a different issue. Yes. That is a different, people should be compliant with their site plan, regardless of whether they have a license agreement.
Yes, but but I assume Brixmore wants this license agreement as we do. So I think that we need to make sure that they are compliant.
So if they're using a parking spot for shopping carts, we're not gonna sign a license agreement.
I don't know.
That's
I mean, it's today is the first day that I've learned that they're not related and that Brixmor may not want to be signing this agreement. I don't know. I just want to make sure that they're compliant with their site plan. Until today, I didn't think that they were unrelated circumstances.
What makes you believe they are?
I don't think that the parking spaces, I think those were all where the shopping carts are. I think that that was supposed to be open parking.
I know, but what makes you think that that in Brixmor's mind, it's related to the license agreement?
I didn't know that they were unrelated until Bob explained it now. It just
Got it.
seems like we're making an agreement with the developer. We want to make sure that the developer's done everything that they needed to do. I mean, it's been quite a lengthy process to get that
Yeah, I know.
up and running.
Vic, do you try to say something?
I would say that I do see it unrelated. However, I've been there. It is the property is it's working well in many respects. But I did see people having trouble getting in and out of their cars, and I took some pictures. I forgot to circulate them again, and I stood there for a little while. And they do have to park. They do have to park within the yellow lines. Except in a nutshell, I'm concerned about the ADA compliance. For example, for a van, I think a van will have trouble. Will have trouble there. I think I would look into that, but I think it's a separate matter, and I don't know how to move it forward. Whether it should be the building department to look into this, but I think in our village, we really have to, everything that's ADA should be a priority. And those, I stood there for a little while. I watched people having trouble getting in and out of the cars. So that's a separate issue, but let's look into it.
Then we have to check to see if the parking spots are the dimensions that were in the site plan that was approved.
If there's a site plan compliance issue, that's a building department issue for sure.
This is a board issue about whether we amend the license agreement. All right, let's put this on for the next board meeting and see what comes of it.
Yes, I'm fine. I did agree on the language, making it clear that it's ADA compliant, the railing.
Okay.
I think there was consensus on that.
Yeah,
to be sure?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
Then move forward.
That being
Yes,
said,
let's move.
we'll visit this on the 14th of September.
Thanks.
Metered parking on south side of West Boston Post Road. Let's talk about this. Jerry?
Mayor, currently we have restricted parking on the south side of Boston Post Road, 2 hours. It's 2-hour parking. It gets used quite a bit. There are services that we provide to that strip of parking, especially the garbage cans that get full all the time, the parking enforcement that has to go there and do the 2-hour parking and keep checking on that. And so what we discussed internally was to make that metered parking and buy a couple of multi-space meter machines and have that metered parking so that instead of 2-hour parking, people can pay to park there. It is extremely heavily used for park users and beachgoers. And in fact, I have seen multiple times people parking there to avoid parking in Harbor Island Park and offloading beach chairs and coolers and walking into the beach. So I had Tony and Tommy go look at the strip. We can get away. So there's 74 parking spots, 20-foot parking spots that could be created there. We would need to purchase 4 multi-space parking meters, and a rough estimate on revenue would be somewhere between $80,000 and $100,000 a year for the village, which would of course offset taxes and all of the other things that we do with parking.
Why would you just do it on the west side and not the east side as well?
It seems to
All
me,
they're going to do is go to the east side, which is already, both sides are totally full. Most
Yeah.
of the time during daylight hours.
So we could, that's fine. My initial thought was because that side supports the businesses on Boston Post Road, and that there's a lot of stop and go traffic on that side, but we could also include that side. There's nothing stopping us from doing that. Absolutely.
There are meters up until St. Thomas's on that side.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then BMW, Toy Box, up to where that garage is that supports that apartment complex, or that complex on Fenimore. There's nothing there.
I used to park on the Post Road side a lot when I actually went out and, went more places than I've been going lately. And what I found is that the parking in front of the BMW is very consistent. People are parked there for well over 2 hours. And so the only actual place to park, if you want to not park in a meter, is parking on the side of the Post Road that's actually near the harbor. And if we're trying to drive people away from Mamaroneck Avenue to keep I think it incentivizes people who are willing to park a little farther and walk. It's very hard to park on the business side of the street because there are businesses who just leave cars there all day or for long periods of time. So if we're going to just charge on the park side of it, I think we're going to have to very more carefully monitor that people are only parking for 2 hours to allow people to take advantage of those spaces.
If the board is interested in having me work this out, we'll do both sides.
No, I get I think what I'm saying is there's a benefit to getting people off Mamaroneck Avenue by providing less expensive or free parking. So what we might be doing is encouraging people who aren't willing to walk that far to just now park on Mamaroneck Avenue. But what I'm saying is there seems to be higher turnover on the field side than on the business side. And then I will try to park there in the morning and I can't park there, and I'll go to a class and then I'll go to the store and I'll come home, and 3.5 hours later, I kind of play the game. There are cars that are parked there for long periods of time.
And that could be employees. That can be employees of those businesses also.
Right, but it's supposed to be 2-hour parking. So I think the whole goal here is to make the park usable for residents.
But I think what you're going to find, Jerry, is on the north side of Boston Post Road, there are a lot of driveways. So that's going to lower the number of spots, but that, you'll find out. Vic, you want to say something? I saw your hand up.
Thank you. Yes, just to include a discussion with the rec committee, with Jason. I'm concerned about Little League. Maybe there could be a 2-hour car, depending on the season, on the time. I'm not a user of Little League. I have a beautiful daughter. I don't have the baseball. I do love baseball, but I do see the dropping and picking up, and I'm concerned about the families doing that, but maybe there's a solution that it could be the season, the 2 hours, instead of just derailing the whole thing, that it could be used so that we're friendly to something like that works.
I don't think the Little League parents will want there to be meters there. I think they will like to continue to park there for free. But I know that we give them passes for Harbor Island, to use. I mean, to me, we are squeezed for money, and this is $100,000 a year that we would be walking away from. I don't know how we do that in good conscience with the economic situation that we have now. My only question was, I thought, and I might be dating and aging myself, I thought we had some old multi-space meters kicking around somewhere. Are those no longer around?
So we use them for when we changed over Harbor Island to the contact users.
Okay.
So we have those, and we have three right now that we use for parts, which are kind of, we could piece one together, but we would need new ones. In addition to, so if I can add to the Little League, we know when Little League season is, so we can also adjust the timing of when the parking, sometimes I'll go after work, Phyllis Park Road, Phyllis Park parking area You know, after 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, it says free parking on the meter. So we can adjust the meters to accommodate that, not have a problem with that.
I
It's
didn't
the,
know they would get the pass.
yeah, they come in
So anyway,
after,
that's why I wanted to consult, because I'm not a user of Little League.
yeah, they also get the pass.
I can
I
tell you,
didn't know that.
So
I have been at Little League games that seemed interminable. They seemed like they were 6 hours.
so the
They're
ba-
pretty
Hour
good-
and a half.
There've been pretty good games this season. I've watched a couple. I mean,
No,
it's
no,
getting-
some of the kids are good. When you're doing 8 and 9-year-olds, you could be there a long time.
Hey, Jerry, if we have the multi-space meters, would these also would people be able to pay on the app?
Yes.
That's convenient when you're at the beach. You're all the way at the beach.
Mhm.
You don't need to, okay.
the area on where BMW is, on both sides, is full of people from BMW,
Yeah,
which is fine to support a business, but I'm not sure that that's what we should be doing. You know, the area from the Delancey Light to Avenue is slightly before that, towards Mamaroneck Avenue, but most of that area is people who are using the park on both sides.
Mhm.
And you go there anytime that, during the days, particularly on great days, and both sides are totally full. You can't park there.
Mhm.
So if you're going to do it, you should, my thought is you do it on both sides.
Okay.
Because all it does is push everybody to one side, to the other side, which, I'm not sure that that's fair either.
Mhm.
I would suggest that we go ahead with the side that we know about right now, and that we then have Tony, look at the other side. I think there are a lot of curb cuts there. I don't think there are as many parking spaces, at least as you move towards Delancey, as you think there are. Pico La Casa, maybe there's one, and maybe in front of the Salon Posh, there might be one. It's Wicker Paradise might be 2. There's not a lot there. I don't know if it would support an entire multi-space meter going there. Down by BMW, I think that's a different story. I think you've got a long stretch. But I think we should look into it. I just wouldn't want that to hold up doing this, because we're just letting money go away.
but I think the point is that people park on the other side of the street because they cannot park for free on the commercial side of the street, because people are parking in those spaces for long periods of time. So it's not really fair to make people pay to park when they can't use those spaces that are only supposed to be 2-hour parking. If they want to go and park for a couple of hours, they now have to pay because we're not enforcing the parking rules on the north side of the street.
Right.
So I think that if we're going to start charging on the south side of the street, we have to be really sure that free parking turns over.
No, so I'll come up with the whole stretch from Mamaroneck Avenue all the way down to Delancey and Oriental.
And respect the monument there. Be very careful.
Yeah.
Do that delineation very carefully when our firefighters, volunteers, and sort of happy.
Yep.
Knowing that is a special spot.
We will absolutely.
Okay,
Okay,
Gary, you got an idea what we want?
I'll have something written up.
Okay, draft regarding cost of counsel for indemnified parties. And before we get into this, what's it now? It's 6:02. How about we go to 7:15 and then go to AP? I don't know if you guys have eaten dinner yet. That sound good?
Sounds good to me.
Let's work fast.
Yeah,
Let's get through this. Let's get through our,
we're going for that.
Yeah.
Approval table, yes.
Okay, we talked about this before. The question really is what do we want to charge for an hourly rate? Either blank which is a number amount, or a percentage of the hourly rate charged by the village attorney for litigation service, unless Board of Trustee so this allows us, if somebody says, you're capping me at 500, but this lawyer cost me 550, they can come back before us and get authority. Is that right, Bob? Bob, you're muted.
Sorry, that's correct.
Okay. How about we use two times the hourly rate of the village attorney? I think that's ample.
So 200%?
Yeah.
I was going to say 125% and $600 an hour, whichever is lower, but
125% would be much lower.
Substantially
Yeah.
lower.
yep, it would be. What do you think? I think it should be the lower of a dollar amount or whatever percentage. If you use 200%, say $500, 200%.
What's your rate, Bob?
The litigation rate is 250.
All right, so that would be 500, but they would allow some flexibility. Well, I guess if your rate goes, your rate's not going to go down. But yeah, I hear you.
I think you're right. It should be a minimum of around 600 from what we discussed the other day, at a minimum.
The problem with
That's
setting
go
a
ahead.
rate,
Go ahead. That's the other problem. Go, Dan, go.
the problem with setting a rate is that's a finite time and point in time. And I don't know attorneys that lower their rates over time.
All right, so let's not have the rate. Let's just say no more than 200% of the hourly rate of the village attorney.
Yeah. And if somebody hires an attorney that's more than us, more than that, they have to come to us for approval. I think that's fair. I think this is a way, at least we can have a little bit of some control. So take out the dollar amount. And put
Well, the question is, what dollar amount are you talking about? Bob, your rate that you charge for when they're out of escrow is what?
250, you just said that.
The litigation rate is 250.
So twice that's 500.
No, I heard that. That wasn't my question. My question was, is I saw rates in 400s for that people were being charged.
That is
Is that true?
That is a rate that's being charged to applicants who are paying the escrow fees that they're paying when they get over 7 hours with regard to particular applications.
Understand.
That rate is $490 for me personally. It's less for, I think it's $400 for Kristen.
But the language of the proposed litigation that we're looking at is tied to litigation services, Dan.
And this is a rate that's being charged to the village, not to somebody else.
This is what we're paying. But that we're paying it.
So litigation services would be different from defending somebody before the ethics board? That's not litigation?
No, what
I
we're
think
saying
what
is,
we're trying to do is come up with a number, and we're tying it to a high number. Litigation services, 200% of litigation services is how much we would pay an independent lawyer like Cindy Goldstein's lawyer. It's how much we're indemnifying. That's what we're talking about.
yeah, this is how much, how much you can hire a lawyer for before you have to come to us and ask for permission to hire a more expensive lawyer. We talk all the time about controlling costs. And right now we have absolutely no control. Absolutely none. If somebody went and hired a lawyer for $1,000 an hour, there's nothing we could do. Nothing.
On the other hand, nobody has abused it, so putting a higher bar could also have to have the other effect. But I understand the concern of putting a limit, but it has not been. Let's be clear that it has not been abused, at least
I didn't say
what I've seen.
I'm saying what could happen.
So then,
There is
but
no
then
bar now.
the other problem is, a couple of issues that could come up is, one is the complexity. And at that point, they could come to you. And let's hope this is needed, of course. But to be on the generous side, they need to be 200, 250. How much is 250? 600, 650?
What are you talking about?
250
He thinks $500 is too low.
for certain, in a complex situation, it is. Bob just mentioned it. It is.
Then,
Fortunately, it doesn't happen, but in a complex situation, it is. Yes.
I think a complex situation will, realistically, just mean more hours. We're not capping the number of hours.
That's the problem with putting a max, because now it kind of tells the tells them how much we can go up.
do you think there should be no max? That doesn't seem to me like something that,
Well, it has not been abused. It's a kind of a reasonable standard. It has not been abused, but if you want to put one, it has to be a high one, like 250. That will more or less be with the rates that are now.
Victor, we're not saying 250, we're saying twice 250, we're saying 500.
250%.
That's what he's saying, Tom, 250%, which would be what?
Oh my God.
I mean, that's paying a lot of money.
How much is that?
250%, so what's 250% of 250? 500,
625,
645.
625.
That's too much. That's ridiculous.
I think so too.
Isn't that the more or less the rate that it's around here? I mean, I'm not making it up. That's the rate around here.
It's too, you know,
Honestly,
if you say that much, you're going to get a guy that's going to charge you. You know, I think that people know that when you're working under the municipality's bill, you got to trim your rates.
that's why it hasn't been abused so far.
Victor, it's been one time, and it's
Twice.
cost the village $100,000.
Twice or three times in my tenure.
This past was cost the village $100,000. So, you know, I want to have some control. That's not control. That's more than that would be in charge now. I just, there's a mechanism here that if somebody can come and make a good case for why it should be more than $500, they can come and make the case. But man, I think $500 an hour is ample for somebody doing basically municipal work.
Will anybody recall what Adam's rate is or was before he reduced it?
625.
See, there you go.
Before he reduced it?
Yes.
So what's he
Yeah.
paying?
That's why that's the reference I was using. I'm not
He's
being
not charging us that.
right because we negotiated.
You know, yeah. So, but if we didn't negotiate, that's what we
No,
do.
we didn't
People will
negotiate.
negotiate. I'm sure
Yeah,
people will
no.
negotiate.
We didn't negotiate it. He offered it.
Why would I negotiate
It
with
was
the
involved.
about the rate if I knew the village was going to pay it?
Well, that's an argument for not actually adopting any kind of bright line rule.
I can't believe you don't want
Tom, to answer your question, the reason would be if you're working for the village to try and get your foot in the door to get additional work.
Yeah.
That wouldn't happen for somebody else.
What, Kelly?
Dan, I just need to say, I'm really bothered by your participation in this discussion because I believe the last discussion we had about this, you were in the process of retaining someone. And if you're in the process still of retaining someone, I don't think you should be, I think you're horribly conflicted talking about what the limit should be, the price limit.
Point.
I understand, Victor, your concern and that maybe if we put, $500 in there or 200% of the hourly rate, maybe that is a problem. I think the provision right after that amount, that they can come to the Board of Trustees and argue for a higher fee, you know, build some protection in. But I think if we make it too high, or if we don't do anything, I think it's irresponsible as a board.
I mean, I think if the controller went in and saw, you're hiring lawyers where you have no control over the costs, they wouldn't be too happy. And no ability to control.
We're losing a focus on something very important, which is this is the rare exception. We're open to appoint and will continue to appoint people with the highest credentials. We have wonderful volunteers. So what we're doing here really is giving assurances that anything that might be an issue or something, they will have an opportunity to defend themselves. That's what we're doing here. So
I don't think we're taking away the opportunity to defend themselves. We are controlling the cost for the taxpayers of this community. That's the whole point of it.
But it has not been abused, okay? So I understand you want to put a limit. That's different, but we're not really, when you say controlling cost, that the argument kind of flips. But I understand you want to put a limit. I know that I spoke what I think should be the reasonable. I think if we're going to do this, then we have to go with the going rate. So, but I've said that, so I don't want to repeat myself.
I think $500 is ample. And it's a provision that allows people, if they have a special circumstance, to appeal to the Board of Trustees. I can't believe we're arguing for higher rates for lawyers. I think $500. I can't. In Westchester County, I think that's a good hourly rate for somebody doing municipal work.
I'm sure Bob would agree.
Absolutely.
Well, all right. Let's try and split the baby. Why don't we go to $550? No?
I think it's too much, but I would do it to get it done. We got to do something. We can't just sit on this.
Does anybody else want to go to $550 and compromise at that? Because this is how legislation works, right? You compromise.
You know, I've said before, I think this all should get to, I mean, I was opposed to this law when it was initially adopted. And I spoke to that effect then. I think this all should be wrapped up into the ethics code changes. And I've been consistent with that point of view.
This is a different section of the law.
I understand that it's a different section of the law, and I'm saying that I'm associating those two things, and I've been consistent with that point of view.
Victor, can you go to $550?
I gave my figure based on the Adam approach. Also, because to be honest, it was quite a struggle to try to find a municipal lawyer when we had to find our own village attorney to help us there, and they were on ethics. On ethics, I can. Some of them are high 708. Even Westchester. I tried to find people who work around this, and they were very, very high. They charge tremendous amount. The ethics experts, they are really high. So that's why I'm giving you an informed decision. This is not just that I made it up. Honestly, the three people who I talked were charging at least suggesting higher those exorbitant rates, which I think they are exorbitant, but they charge them because there's very few people who do this, honestly, at that certain level.
So you're not willing.
That's why my decision is not just that I'm arbitrary or I'm coming with 500. I'm not. This is not an uninformed point.
Well, I'm trying to get a compromise, and I guess there's no compromise here. Because that's how this works. What's how, it should work. But apparently it's not how it works. I want to ask Natchez because he shouldn't even be on this. Let's go to the next item.
You didn't recuse from this.
You shouldn't. You should.
I agree.
We're leaving this without a cat. Okay. Review of the 50-foot setback requirement. So we have the law in front of us that now gives the ability to the zoning board to offer, in essence, a variance, but it's really a permit, on a 50-foot setback. This is what we could come to. So anybody have any questions or concerns about this?
I do, but if someone else has some, I'm happy to wait.
Well, I will say that I still think that this should have been a planning board prerogative. The planning board thought that too. I think it makes sense to do it during site plan. I think it adds another hurdle and a more difficult hurdle to jump through that didn't need to happen. This whole of the 50-foot was not well thought through to begin with. But that being said, it's better than the fact that now there is absolutely no ability to do anything in the 50-foot setback, which precludes anything from being improved. And a lot of properties already have unattractive items in the 50-foot setback. And if we didn't make some provision for ameliorating that, they would stay in perpetuity. So I'm not happy with it, but it's better than what's there now. So I'll compromise and vote for it if it comes up. Anybody else?
Kelly, what are your
Circulated.
concerns?
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dan.
He said, he asked me what my concerns were. I share Tom's concerns. I really wish this were a more streamlined process for an applicant. I think we've created a mess, but we have to do something. And if creating a mess is the best we can do, so be it. Looking at, I still have some concerns about the definition. So on page 2, section 4, section 240-5 of the code, mean high water level. The average height of the high waters of a tidal water body over a 19-year period immediately preceding the current year. I'm still confused by that. If this is a term of art that people in the field would understand, then it is what it is. But to me, it's confusing. On page 5, I have mean high, another problem, it's just confusing. The definition we have of mean high water level of non-tidal water body of water course. I just underlined like all parts of it. I just had a giant question mark. Again, if this is a term of art that's coming from the field and professionals understand it, I'm fine. Water body, any natural or artificial pond, lake, embayment, reservoir, or other area which usually or intermittently contains water and which has a discernible shoreline, seems broad to me. I wonder if this could be a puddle. I'm concerned about that being broad. Then when we get to page 7, section 9, P3, require that any parking areas within the buffer must be constructed with permeable pavers. I would suggest that we add non-structural paved area, not just parking area. So if there's a patio or if there's a walkway, that also be permeable pavers. And my last comment is general, and that I just want to remind us, we had discussed this before, and I hope we follow through when we schedule a public hearing, if we get that far, that we send mail notice to every property owner who would be affected by this. I think that was a problem. Last time we had asked Greg before he left the village if he could get those names easily. I thought he could, that's my memory, but I would just like to do that.
Jerry, do we know if Mr. Cutler made that list before he moved on? You're muted, Jerry.
I have to check. I don't know if he did. I can look in his laptop to see if he has that list.
I don't think it's a hard list to make, though. I think you can get the list. My concern is we did not, when we were, taking 100, I mean, with the Army Corps plan, which now seems to be up in the air, we did not notify people that their properties were going to be affected. And it's not something we typically do. So if we're going to make an exception in this case, then I think we sort of need to extrapolate in what other circumstances should we do this, because we didn't tell people that their properties were subject to an easement according to the Army Corps plan. And the Flood Mitigation Committee strove mightily to get that done, and the determination was that it was not a village policy and it didn't happen.
Well, but I think just to clarify, the Army project, they didn't know exactly, they weren't at the planning points where they knew what properties were going to require takings.
They had a list of properties that they thought would require easements, and the Flood Mitigation Committee wanted to notify those section, block, and lot numbers, which were actually listed in the plan, and it didn't happen. It didn't happen. So.
But I remember people who knew that their properties had easements coming to meetings and complaining about it.
Right, because some people, as happened with the moratorium, some people were paying attention and were able to find out, but it was not, people weren't notified. And I'm just saying there's similar circumstances. We didn't do it then. And if we're going to be doing this, I think we need to have a policy about, when we notify people about not necessarily the Army Corps plan, again, although that was the village's obligation, about a zoning change. What are the parameters that we would do these kinds of mailings, so that we do it, so that we're consistent with our policy.
And perhaps that standard could be whenever what we're going to do could constitute a takings argument.
But that could be almost any zoning change.
Yeah.
I just think we have to have a policy.
Yeah. Yep.
To schedule a public hearing on the law. Well, I guess we should answer Kelly's comments, but do we have to circulate this to boards again? Has this draft been circulated? It's been so long.
Yeah, I had that as a question too, Nora. This draft hasn't been circulated, I don't think.
I don't think so.
The last time it was circulated, they all thought that they should be the one to hear it.
So it's February 25th is the draft. So it has to be circulated, which just, I think, extends out our ability to schedule a public hearing.
Well,
Yeah.
but don't you usually schedule the public hearing with enough time to do that?
Yes, yeah. I just think we have to factor that in. So what about Kelly's questions?
Are
Can we
they
answer those?
substantive changes? I don't think they're substantive, baby.
Well, they're definitions. They're definitions, that's all.
Certainly are substantive. It's been so long since we've worked on this law that I don't exactly remember. I know Dan had a hand in a lot of these definitional changes. I don't remember whether it was these or not.
And I know Victor brought some in as well from more standard,
I think we had gone to that round, that this was the terms of art, and we figured out where they came from. I think we had done it. So,
so these are fine with everybody? These are
for
like,
example, on the high mark on those things, I think Mr. Natchez was
All right.
said they were in line with what the consultants use or what they use.
I think we should make the change about a patio. So, I mean, I think that's a good point. Kelly's point about a patio being
Surfaces.
permeable.
that was in section 9 on page 7.
Yeah.
342-76P3.
So what is it that you want to add to that, Kelly?
What I was suggesting that it says require that any parking areas or non-structural paved area. I don't know if that's the right language, but what I wanted to include was paved walkways, paved patios.
And it's required that any parking area or paved area within a 50-foot buffer.
Yeah.
Because
I don't mean the structural paved area that would support a home, right? But I'm talking about,
paved
Yeah.
area, that's a footing.
I also think you should take the word pavers out and make it pervious surface. Because pavers are not necessarily, you could use other materials that are more pervious than, pavers.
Well, it says permeable pavers or porous pavement.
why don't we just make it permeable or porous pavement?
I don't want.
Permeable or
Pavement
porous surface.
Surface.
It's very
Surface.
specific.
Surface.
Permeable or porous surface.
Okay, so it's required that any parking areas or paved areas within a 50-foot buffer must be constructed of permeable or porous material.
With a porous surface or materials.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bob, you got that?
Got that.
Thank you.
So why don't we do that change? And then we can send it out. We schedule a public hearing in September and then send it out with the time frame for the boards to look at it.
Can we schedule a public hearing tonight because we're at a work session and we haven't noticed it? Should we just circulate it to the boards and then schedule a public hearing in 3 weeks? Or
Can we schedule a public hearing with that change tonight?
Well, you don't usually do it at a work session, do you?
right? No,
We do it at the regular meeting tonight, yeah.
Yeah.
We don't have, let's keep it to the 14th.
If my suggestion is if you want to schedule, you schedule it for the first meeting in October, and that gives the boards plenty of time to.
No, there's a schedule for how you do this, Dan. We're gonna, at the 14th, we're gonna schedule a meeting depending, we worked out a whole schedule of how to do this stuff.
Mhm. But there's no reason why we can't circulate it to the boards now, correct?
We wanna make that change.
Right, but I mean, with the changes.
Well,
We need,
how we decided to do it, what the policy was that once we had scheduled a public hearing, then we would circulate it.
okay, that's just gonna delay it, but that's okay.
I know, but we passed the policy.
Right.
Let's not kick the ball down the road the first time we get a chance to use it.
Mayor,
Jerry?
can you want me to get the addresses for the people in R5 and R6, which we've already done, or a smaller list, the ones up against the rivers? I need to have that clarification.
This is the C1 and C2, right? Against the rivers.
Against the rivers.
Yeah.
I'll make that list. Sorry, I misspoke. C1 and C2 up against the river.
I mean, I guess it included that MR1 as well.
Yeah, marine. Okay. MC1.
MR1.
MC1.
Yeah,
Okay,
version. Yeah.
we'll have those.
All right. All right. Jerry, is Mr. Long familiar with this law?
I don't know. I'll ask him tomorrow. We have meetings scheduled twice a week now with me and Mr. Long, so I'll ask him at 9:30 tomorrow morning.
Okay. The next up at bat is the certificate of occupancies. This is what is in the village code now.
Correct, the highlighted section.
The question was whether to issue temporary COs or not. Temporary COs are issued before all conditions of the different land use boards are, obtained.
Yeah.
And other, for instance, I understand in New Rochelle, you can't get a temporary CO for, an apartment building, so everything is done.
I mean, in a lot of cases, you just get a temporary certificate of occupancy because your stove hood isn't done. It's a small punch list item. And we've issued them, we've issued significant ones that haven't always worked out well for us.
But that isn't the case in the city. In the city, they have had buildings that I've worked in where they gave a temporary C of O for the first half of the building and had people move in when the second half of the building was still under construction. So I don't know if that's really the case. And I don't know where you got that information from, because I know that in New York City, they give temporary C of Os for the elevators. The elevator, you can have an elevator that hasn't had its final inspection, but you can use it for passengers under certain conditions. So, I think this is a tool that's used in every municipality, one respect or another.
I, in fact, moved into one of those buildings in the city that was only halfway finished.
Yeah, it happens regularly. Yeah, but it has to be in a safe condition at half, which is what our code says. I know that there's been a couple of people in the community who've been upset about temporary C of Os, but I don't think that you throw the baby out in the bathwater, because people who might not understand the utility of it too.
Well, but we have had circumstances where they have been, that the temporary certificate of occupancy lasted a period of years. And so although it says 6 months, once you've issued a TCO, it's very hard to pull the certificate of occupancy. So we've had these situations where people have chronically been in buildings with temporary certificates of occupancy. So I think maybe we need to tighten up the circumstances, and maybe that's something that the building inspector and the planner and Jerry can think about, in which cases where they've been issued, where they've gone on for well beyond the period of time that they were anticipated to be issued for.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have a neighbor that had one for 10 years.
Where was that?
Across the street from me on Pine Street.
On Pine Street?
Mm-hmm. And then yep.
But our code says a temporary certificate shall be effective for a period of time not to exceed 6 months.
Mm-hmm. But they just kept renewing them. And
So-
it's very hard to, once you've let somebody move into a house, to pull the certificate of occupancy. We had that problem in litigation recently.
I know.
So I think we have to be very mindful about how we do these things.
At least take a look at other municipalities to see if they have come up with some language that could be. I think we had this discussion before also, didn't we? Unless there's some, because I haven't heard any proposal to edit this or improve it.
No, there was no backup.
So.
No, we haven't done the research on this. because this is, I think, the first time we might have been talking about it. It has been on this agenda for
Months.
months.
Yeah.
Dare I say, maybe a year, almost a year.
So, I mean, can we take a survey of what other communities in Westchester County are doing?
We can do that.
I don't think this New York City is analogous, but I think,
No.
Focusing it on our own concerns, so maybe we do the improvements.
We'll contact the other managers and see what the process is in those communities. I think this is easily solved by limiting the renewal process. But I can do that research and provide it to the board.
Thank you.
But what happens if you, I mean, in reality, if you tell someone you're not going to renew their temporary certificate of occupancy, they can just go to court because they don't want to be evicted. So we're in a situation, we put ourselves in a situation of having to evict people, but as opposed to just ensuring that the buildings are constructed properly within a reasonable time.
And we are in situation.
Except that in that case, you do have a remedy against the, I guess, a stick against the property owner, which is if you don't have a CO, the village can recover civil penalties for that period, even without evicting the people. So
But it just seems like we're putting ourselves in a position we don't necessarily need to be in. Yeah, I mean, we don't want to be getting penalties from people.
if it solves
You
the
get to be
problem,
the-
maybe,
You get to be the bad guy.
yeah, I know. But if it creates the incentive to finish the punch list items,
Yeah.
then it's it's not necessarily a bad thing.
I think hearing from Jerry what other municipalities do is a good idea.
Yep. We'll have it in 30 days.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
what'd you say, Jerry?
30 days, Mayor.
Okay, so we'll
End of September.
put this back on the agenda for the second meeting in September.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, next on, we're actually making some headway here. 50-foot setback. Full-time attorney and land use attorney.
So this is something I put on the work session. It's been there for some time. Some of us ran on the platform of a full-time village attorney and land use attorney. I took the RFP that was previously used for looking for an attorney, tried to update it somewhat. There's nothing magical about, the rates or anything. We can, but I'd like to move forward on it. I'm putting out an RFP.
Well, I can just say this. I ran originally in 2017 on hiring a full-time village attorney. I was responsible, I think, largely for a full-time village attorney who was a village employee that was hired in 2007. When I came here after I won the election, I had a discussion with the village attorney, and I told him that that was my goal. But the board was a different configuration at the time, and we said we'd give it a year. And I can say this, I don't think that the village has ever had better legal representation than we have now. I don't think we've had a situation where we've avoided the kind of litigations that otherwise we fell into before. And I think that we have an excellent arrangement where we have a good attorney who is in the office every day and supporting our staff, which was one of the main reasons that I wanted a full-time village attorney, was to support the staff. And when I ran again in 2019, I didn't say that. So I'm willing to admit that it's something I did say, but I was shown that things could be done better. So that's where I stand on this.
Then let me ask you one thing. There are actually 2 RFPs here, and there is really no mention of full-time. The first one is just I think similar to the RFP that we used probably 3 years ago, actually, when Bob came on board. And the first one is for, the first paragraph talks about village attorney and land use attorney. And then it has the 40 hours. It has a certain number, 150 here, which I don't know where it comes from. The meetings have changed, but that's not a major point. And separate, there's the land use council. So what's here in the backup doesn't match what you explained. Did you hear me? I'm sorry. Was that loud enough?
I'm hearing it, Victor. So we can change the language.
This
to
doesn't match what you were explaining.
amplify it in a better manner.
Well, I'm just telling you what what we have in front of us, which is different
I
from what you said.
understand that. I don't profess to be an attorney.
No, this is not legal. This is just basically the RFPs that were used 3 years ago, but it's.
There were two
That's
RFPs that I had submitted.
Correct.
In either event, that's the goal of trying to move forward, is to have 2 RFPs. One is for a full-time village attorney and one is for a land use attorney. So either we want to do that or we don't want to do it.
First one, as I said, is not for a full-time village attorney. The first one you have out is not for a full-time village attorney. It's just an RFP for law firms. So it's different, because if you're doing a kind of a search or to do a full-time, it's I would say different from just doing the RFP. It would require it is a more personnel matter. This is a contract. Essentially, this one seems contractual. This is contractual, if I can summarize it that way. This is 2 RFPs to have attorneys be hired under contract in both instances.
Understand. And Victor, your points are well taken. So how would you like to modify the language to say it the other way?
I think it's a different animal. It's a different story, because then it requires if it's a full-time position, it requires the restructuring, the study of the hours, the fee, the salary. It is different from a contractual agreement where you can more or less identify how many hours. And we have already had a couple retainers. We have a retainer now, so with that's a guy. But it's a different story. That's why I got lost with your explanation.
Okay.
And they actually don't. The land use council does follow what we used way back, but not the first one. The first one is really
Okay,
not
my
what you.
You're an attorney. How would you change the first one to reflect what is the desire?
I think it's nothing I can do or can do now. It is an employment matter. It would need to be restructured that way. It would require elaboration, and I think it would require study. So that's why I was at least trying to understand what we have in front of us and the options. But on that, we have a different, this is going in a different direction.
So the question is whether or not from my vantage point. The question is whether we want to move to a full-time village attorney or not, and a part-time land use attorney. Those are the questions before the House. The language, is you have pointed out, is not the correct language, but the language can be modified. The question is the concept. Either we want to move forward on it or we don't want to move forward on it.
I think it's important to find out what services are being provided now, how staff feels about the services that are being provided now, what we would want in the future. I think what this requires is looking at what's going on now and judging if that's working or not, other than just being doctrinaire and saying, I once said this, so I'm going to, continue on down that path. I think we have to have, it's an important and a hard decision. I think what Mr. Natchez is talking about is hiring someone who's a village employee who works directly for the village as the village attorney. And that is a huge decision. And if you hire someone and that person doesn't work out, it leaves the village in a real bad hole for a long time. So I think what you have to do is have a parameter of what you want and where you want to go, where you want to take this community on a legal level, and honestly look and say, is that not happening now?
I think the issue, the only way to have an organized discussion is the land use piece. If you, the way it's integrated now has a lot of benefits. If the decision is that there are, and altogether, if the decision on the land use piece is the one that's the concern, then that should be either decided first or considered first before kind of reinventing the whole issue. That's how I see things. If not, then stay the course, because it's I think you're doing suggesting two different things. We had some discussion about the second piece of it, which we didn't get to a consensus, but if that's the intent, then that should be considered in the manner the board decides. But let's conclude it. Trying to resolve all this it's beyond our elements here, and it requires a lot of analysis, especially this time we don't have the elements there. So
yeah, I agree with Trustee Tafour, and I think we should bear in mind too is that there have been many changes in personnel in the village of Mamaroneck in the past year. We've lost key people who have institutional knowledge and who have a sense of how this community works. I'd hate to have to try and get, and we also have significant litigation that is currently being handled that is very important to the future of this community. So I think this is a situation where you got to tread lightly and look before you leap.
the reason, and I'll finish with this, the reason I did mention land use council is because there has been concern. I have been concerned with having Bob's law firm do both zoning, board of appeals, and the rest of land use, because that has created at least one conflict of recusal, and also that is typically separated, and I know he's been trying to, and I don't want to get it. I mean, it'll be difficult to get without the specifics, but that is one concern that I think we will have to overcome. Essentially, there was avoiding those kind of situations. I think will be better for the village. So that's a discussion that was pending. So that's why I raised the issue of land use council.
So why don't we put that on the agenda to discuss, especially the zoning part?
Yeah, I think we should. I think we've heard from some land use boards that that they feel that there should be a separation, and I think we've discussed that, and I think that we really should be discussing that.
All right, let's talk about that part at the next meeting. The next is dogs in village parks.
So,
Nora, go ahead.
yeah, so there's a little bit of confusion about this, and there's been a lot of emails about this. So can we just look at the red line document?
Okay.
So the Rec and Parks Commission had asked that the law be bifurcated, and that we just actually deal with the proposal for having dogs in Harbor Island Park first, and then have and putting the dogs in the other park for a different conversation. So if we could talk about just the dogs in Harbor Island Park, with that light, is anybody amenable to that?
I am amenable to that bifurcation.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, that's fine. If that's the way the Parks and Rec want to go about this, that's fine.
So,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I'm just saying it seemed to be one way of approaching it, because there seemed to be less of all the complaints. There weren't complaints about doing it in Harbor Island Park. There were other parks. So that maybe we would have different conversations about them. So if we're going to go through with that, then we need to look at these drafts, which are from June, and see what changes we would want to make.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to do that, but I just want to, I was in a park recently, and I came up with an idea. And one of the things, I mean, and this is kind of separate from this, right? But you know what a sewage treatment plant is, obviously, right?
Sure.
Hard to miss. If you go to the end of that, on the side, not the side by Mamaroneck Avenue, the other side,
Mm-hmm.
Planted next to the sewage treatment plant is like a row of pine trees, right?
Yes.
That, I guess, at one point they were trying to hide the sewage treatment plant. If you take and you go all the way down to the end of the building, and then the next time you're down there, just take a look at this. There is, maybe 70 yards from the building, there's a sewer, storm sewer grate, right?
Yep.
And that's an area that kids never play on. It's never used for sports activity. Every once in a while you see kids kicking a ball, but you know what I mean? It's not a field. And that might be a spot sometime in the future. And obviously this is something everybody consider in the community, for a decent sized dog park. Because a dog park, I think, should be in our community park rather than in a neighborhood park. But just that being aside, just next time you go down there, just take a look at that and tell me what you think. And if you don't think, it just occurred to me when I was down there.
I mean, I think we absolutely need a dog park in the village, but that's a separate conversation from dogs and parks, I think.
It is a separate conversation. I agree with you.
And so,
I'll go down and look at that. I know that when my kids were playing, the soccer teams practiced there all the time. They didn't have games there, but that was a practice field that was well used there.
Okay.
And maybe you're not seeing it because we don't have soccer teams practicing, but I would want to talk to the soccer league about that space before we
did it. I mean, I think that any location that we might have a dog park, there's going to be, pros and cons for it. But that, I think, is a whole separate community conversation to have a dedicated dog park. And I know, I know everybody touts the one in Rye Town, but it's quite expensive to administer. There's a cost to dog parks because you have to do the proper enforcement. So I think that's a factor as well, which is not, and I think the benefit, and Jerry can speak to this, but it's a little bit easier to enforce any dog rules in Harbor Island Park because there is some staff in the park that's able to do that. And there have been complaints from people in other community parks about dogs in those parks at all the time, on leash and off leash, where they're not allowed. And it's simply a very hard thing for the village to enforce. So if maybe tonight we go through Harbor Island Park, and then if we have time, discuss other parks.
Okay, let's go through Harbor Island.
All right, so we have two drafts that are both dated the 3rd. And one is redlined, and I think that might be the easier one to go through. Does everybody have a redline version?
My red line's dated the 2nd.
Version 7, Nora?
I have June 3rd.
June 2nd. I have June 2nd, version 7.
Oh, sorry, you know what? It's got 2 different dates on it. Okay,
Close enough.
it's got 2 dates, okay. So, all right, so if paragraph, so I think simply by making no changes in paragraphs F, the one that begins with the first 3 paragraphs, they would just be the same way as proposed in the red line.
Mhm.
But that the 4th paragraph, which is actually parentheses 2,
Mhm.
it would be year round, like deleting September 1st through December 1st. So year round was crossed out. To leave year round in,
September 1st to December 1st was because we were talking about doing a trial period.
right, and we're not, yeah,
We
so,
make every trial period.
right, and the whole idea was that the trial period was going to be in every park, but that's really not what that's not, the committee had actually recommended that the trial period be in other parks. I think this is just, it all kind of, the recommendations happened right before the pandemic, and so they weren't fleshed out. But the trial, the proposal was that the trial would have been only in Columbus Park and Florence Park, but it ended up being in all the parks in the law. So in any event, just leaving it year round between,
Strikeout.
yeah. So leaving it in Harbor Island Park year round between 7 a.m. and dusk. Dogs are permitted in all areas of the park other than the playing fields, playgrounds, and the beach when under the supervision of a person having custody or control of the dog and on a leash not exceeding 6 feet in length. There was a conversation about having a fixed leash. I'm not sure why that was stricken.
I remember that.
I remember.
Yeah.
I remember the conversation. I don't know if you care.
Yeah. Just
Oh.
so,
It was because Dan Natchez was saying you're keeping someone who has a flexi leash. If they keep it at the 6 feet the whole time, what do you care if it has the potential to become a flexible leash? It just, some people might not have a fixed leash. But if you keep it at 6 feet, but Dan can jump in if I'm putting words in his mouth.
No, that's how I remember it. I remember because I agreed with Dan.
I think that this was a comment that was put in by the Parks and Rec Commission, I believe, and it was that the whole point that it's too easy to not keep it at the fixed length, and then enforcement is difficult. So it just makes it easier for people to have to comply because they have the correct length of the leash, and
Yep.
and that it's less of a supervision issue. I mean, the dog that I walk is not my dog, and she is tiny, so I have no preference.
I don't think we need fixed myself. On a
Anybody
leash,
else?
Not exceeding 6 feet.
Anybody else?
I don't think you need fixed either, but I think it's just.
And you walk a dog. I mean, you walk a big dog.
I do. And sometimes I do put him on a flexi leash and just leave it, short.
Mm-hmm.
It just depends on the circumstance I'm in.
Okay. And then we would delete the rest of we would delete Columbus Park, Florence Park, and that, and then on page 2. Oh, you know what it is? I don't know, the way mine is printed, I have both sections. I have, all right, so page 2. 4 becomes 5, and police dogs they got rid of canine, just police dogs.
Yep.
It's pretty simple.
Jerry, do we still have approved goose dogs? I mean, we used to have.
Yeah, we have one that lives across the street from Village Hall, and they are frequent goose chasers.
And we still hire the geese people, right? The
Yeah.
geese people,
We still have geese.
because there's a lot of geese in front of the pavilion.
Yep. And we've tried to get the geese people to change the times, and they have. And, you know, it might be a little bit more than just chasing them. But we get into all sorts of issues when we get into other methods.
They counted 40. And there was, even if they weren't there, there was a lot of evidence of them.
That's also evidence that the coyotes are not around.
Yeah,
Yeah, what's up with the coyotes? Not that I missed them, but what happened there?
They're gone. We've got deer back in Oriental walking around.
we have bunnies,
Oh, bunnies everywhere.
bunnies.
And chipmunk.
I
So-
think I think those changes are good, and I would just convey thanks to the Rec Commission. I know they've worked crazy hard on this for a long time, so thank them.
And then I think we need to discuss, like, if we want to take up the other, you know, any of the other parks, and maybe we want to put that on a future agenda.
I think so.
I have a quick point about Columbus Park,
Yes.
if I can share my screen. Where is it? 1 second. So this plot of land right here,
It's not up yet. Okay, go ahead.
having frequently walked home, this is on a side street, a one-way street next to Volunteers called Sheldrake Place.
Mm-hmm.
This is a dedicated dog park for the individuals who live, rent, own, whatever the case may be, at the Sheldrake Place apartments or units.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't know it either until I walked by and said, wow, it's even a sign here. So the argument that individuals who live at Sheldrake Place need a place to have their dogs run and, you know, exercise and do the other thing that the dogs do, it's right here in their backyard. So I'm going to move the screen just a little bit, and you can see where we are right here and how convenient it is. So the point is, we're adding more playground equipment to the park,
Mm-hmm.
and we know that there's going to be a conflict between little kids and big dogs or dogs. And I'm not sure if it's a valid, you know, argument that Sheldrake Place residents don't have a place. Now I'm about ready to have a conversation with Charlotte, and we go site visiting sometimes, and this is going to be one of the sites that we visit to get it cleaned up. But they do have their own dog park. So that's the sign right there.
Okay.
You know
I
what?
can't get into it. I can't get close by because
Mm-hmm.
My own self, I mean, listen, I don't have a dog. I like dogs a lot. I don't have a dog. And I think 99% of dog owners are good, responsible owners. But, you know, for me, it's that 1% who, you know, thinks their dog is fine and it's okay if their dog runs up to people. And it really scares sometimes children and older people. That's my concern.
So we do have a dog park. It's just not a village dog park. It's a private dog park. But there is one here for these residents. So, and to their credit, they created one because they knew it was going to be, you know, families with dogs, like the Avalon is where I live.
So if we, at the last time we discussed this, we had hoped that the Rec Commission would reach out to or figure out a way of getting input from neighbors. So I'm at the next meeting, all of the comments that we've received about dogs and parks are going to be part of the agenda for the rec commission, and to think about, so maybe they can do some outreach to see what other parks might be available. But I think they need to know, they haven't seen any of the emails that we've received, and I think they should.
Yep.
Well, they haven't, okay, they haven't seen any emails, pro and con,
No.
all of that. Yeah.
No. And there have been a lot, so.
Is Dan on? Dan, can you hear us? Sign off.
Yes, I can.
Have you gotten, I didn't make the meetings in July because I was out, but did you go to the meeting with Jason and Barry to Parks, or Nora, you were there?
Yeah.
You were there, okay.
Yeah.
Do they want this for September, or are they talking about something else?
Well, so I think they were hoping that we could discuss discuss dogs in all the parks. But that if we split it up, it might be a possibility of fast tracking Harbor Island Park and evaluating which other parks should have dogs.
I think that they were smart to do that. Dan Sonoff, I just want to ask you a question. Doesn't Scarsdale have a dog park?
Mm-hmm.
No, not that I'm aware of. They didn't have one when I was there. I believe New Rochelle has one.
Yes.
Right.
Ward.
Yeah, Wood, okay.
Dan, we have to do that. We have to do that survey of the managers. So let's throw this one in as well, this question in as well. This way we can get, we can kill two birds with one stone. I don't mean killing birds. I'm just, Christy's going to give me the look now.
I'm already shaking my head.
Right.
One of the first things I do when I return on Monday.
So are you carving out Harbor Island Park and we're done with Harbor Island Park? Like, is that off? And then you would just want to have the park commission discuss?
Well,
The others, yeah.
we'll be able to pass this law that just does it in Harbor Island. That's
Yes.
the intent, right, Nora?
Yes, and I think that although maybe people can't remember this, in January or February, we had a very good map that Jason put together that showed the places in Harbor Island Park. So I think that would be very good agenda backup.
Yes.
So, okay, so when would this start in Harbor Island Park?
As soon as we pass the law, if we pass the law. So, I mean, we have to schedule a public hearing on the law. I don't know who it has to get circulated to.
I don't think it has to go to land use boards. So it's not
Yeah, but you're creating a law just for Harbor Island Park, and then you're going to amend the law? Because we should start, if we're going to start with this provision for Harbor Island Park, we should just have a law for Harbor Island Park, and then once everything shakes out with the other parks, then just amend the law, right? Or do you want to wait for the whole thing?
No, we're going to start
no.
with Harbor Island. I'm sorry.
Yeah, do Harbor Island Park first. Proceed with Harbor Island Park while the other parks are being evaluated.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, and if there's a hiccup in Harbor Island, then, at least we'll have a heads up, right?
Yeah, and I think that Jerry can really speak to this, but enforcement is an issue, and because there are people who are in the park who now have the ability to enforce the code. Yeah. It's not like everybody. I mean, I think the rec commission thought anybody who worked for the village could issue a summons.
No.
Any parks department person could just issue it, and that's not the case. So it's a burden for the village to have subtle differences.
But we have one parks employee on purpose, and we have one recreation employee on purpose. But their home base, though, is Harbor Island Park.
Right.
So if there are issues in Harbor Island Park, we'll address them. But the other parks, I know that they put miles on their vehicles to go to the other parks and do inspections and talk to people. And we're trying to do soft enforcement, relying on maybe just a discussion and trying to change the culture. But there are people who are very used to every morning and every afternoon going to Florence or going to every other park that they live close by and continuing to walk their dogs. So
Sure.
At some point, I got to bring, we have to bring out a hammer. We can't just have a nice, we can't share a cup of coffee.
Jerry, the park rangers, can they give out a ticket?
I don't know anything about the park rangers, truthfully. I think they're more like watch persons, watch people
Yeah.
than in fact the traditional park ranger. You know, like in the movie Elf, the park rangers are mean and they're tough. So, I don't think that we have park rangers like that, but I know that the recreation person and the parks employee are pretty tough. So, so I think we'll make some headway this year, and that was the intent. The intent was to try to get try to get some individuals who actually work in the facilities with the ability to write people up.
Okay. Thank you for the movie Elf reference.
That's great.
And maybe we could put some more signage in the parks that don't allow dogs so people are more aware of it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think there was so much confusion with what people thought was being considered for parks and dogs. Some people thought, you know, we were going to create a dog park within Florence Park. You know, that was never being considered.
Right.
And people who don't want dogs in the park think they're going to be allowed all the time. And we're talking about, you know, an hour in the morning, 2 hours at night. That's it. I mean, it's not, I just think there's a lot of confusion about what was being considered.
But then there are also a lot of people who understand the dogs aren't allowed in the park, but they're there all the time, and they fear that it will be bigger if there are people there. So that's where we have to have a whole conversation.
Right. One of the things when we got a lot of information on Facebook, there was, you know, there were pictures of dogs running around Florence Park off leash.
Yep.
So not only are they not supposed to be in a park,
right,
they're running off leash.
Yep.
And
yeah.
It was portrayed like, oh, then it's a good thing, but it was like, no, they're allowed twice.
Right. Exactly.
But you know, whatever. You know, I mean, listen, I don't want to be anti-dog. I'm really not. I like dogs. I just, we'll do what we got to do. But I think this is a good start, and I really do applaud the rec board for realizing that it's better to get started with half the loaf and see how that works out.
Yeah.
You know, so a lot of times people
That's true.
get locked into something and they don't. This is a good start. I commend them. So can we put this on the agenda for the regular meeting to schedule a public hearing in September?
sure.
Everybody okay with that?
Yep.
Okay.
And we'd schedule the public hearing for September 29th or for the first week in October.
I think you could do it for the 29th, right? Because you don't have to have, you know what I mean? You don't have to inform boards and commissions or anything, so why not?
Yeah, okay.
Is that, yeah.
Okay. And then, and also the next meeting for the Park and Recs Commission is September 2nd. So we can have kind of a report back by the 14th from them about other progress, other parks.
All right, it's past 7:15. How about if people cannot add stuff to the agenda, the only thing on the old business that we'll have next week is changing authority to appoint supervised clerk treasurer, and then all of the new business will be new business still, and we can just roll through that next week or in 2 weeks, unless of course any stuff that needs to get on by the staff. But I think this is a good point to go into our regular meeting and try and get out and have a decent dinner time. So you want to open up your other binders? We're going to go to the AP, order the bills, part of the meeting.
There you go. We'll have a 5-minute break.
You want a 5-minute break? Okay.
That'd be great. Thanks.
I like that book I did too. I'll see you in 5 minutes, guys.
Yep.
Break. You meet yours.
Hi, gang. Alrighty. Hello.
Hello.
I am here.
Everybody have a nice little break?
Yes, thank you, Victor.
Yeah, good idea, Vic.
Tom,
Okay, crew. The first item on the agenda is the order of the bills. Right, the bills tonight are $312,401.50. Anybody have any questions or concerns?
I had a couple on page 18.
18?
This seems to be an ongoing issue with the fire department in terms of pest control. Can we get this under control or not? Jerry?
You want to get it under control, or do you want us to get a new company to do pest control?
I don't know. I don't know what the issues are, but it keeps reappearing that we keep spending money. It's not a lot of money, but it adds up. So I guess the question is, what's the issue?
There's a monthly inspection fee of $240 at the firehouse.
It's a monthly inspection?
Yeah, it says monthly inspection. It's $240.
That's in all the firehouses.
Yep. And I guess they spray, and when they find something, they do what they do. So that's why it keeps coming up. It's $240 per month. I can check into it. If you want details of what they actually do and all of that stuff, sure, we can do that, of course.
So you're telling me it's what you have is a yearly contract?
We may or may not have a contract, but we have a monthly fee that we pay. Dan, you recall if there was a contract with Dana recently or years ago?
I don't know, but it's, like any location, some areas of the village, there are pests that we have to deal with.
Yeah, we'll look at it, but this is a monthly inspection fee that they charge us.
Just also bear in mind that they are old buildings and they have industrial kitchens that get a lot of use.
Yeah.
Page 34. There are a lot of bills from Woodward and Kern. I thought we stopped using Woodward and Kern many months ago. I know it's under the escrow, but something doesn't sound right.
What I think doesn't sound right is the fact that they didn't bill us for a long time.
Well, I think going forward that we have to say if we don't get bills within 30 or 60 days, we don't pay them.
Okay, so this one's from October 2019.
Yeah, I mean, it just,
So if you bill the village from October in 2019, I won't pay it. If a vendor bills us now in August from October 2019, I'll refuse that. And in fact, I have, but I can't go into detail.
yeah, but it's unfair to the residents, I mean, it's a cost that was incurred and should be paid, but only if it's done timely. Many months afterwards to come after them and say, oh, by the way.
Well, let's make sure that the delay wasn't our fault too.
I know about this. It wasn't our fault. It was them finally getting around to billing us.
Okay. Any other questions or concerns?
I have a couple. Are you done?
I know that.
Okay, I have a couple. Pages 6 and 15, there's this Sinopia.
Yeah.
One is 5,000, the other one is, it's a lease. What is it? I just can't understand.
But Finovia is the GPS units that we have in the vehicles.
It's the tracking units, Victor, that we have in the vehicles.
Okay.
Okay.
External lease, so it's a lease, and the units are the units that are in this, okay. And this is for,
3 months.
this is a 3-month bill, okay.
Yeah, 3 months.
All right, okay, just the description, it says GPS, but it doesn't.
We have 100 units with GPS in them.
Wow.
So we're paying, so why is it in 2 places? That's
2 different leases because must have added, but Dan can probably speak to that even more.
If it's in 2 locations, also it's probably split among multiple lines. So let me take a look at page 6 and 15.
One is,
One is police and one is village manager vehicles. All DPW goes under village manager.
Did you hear Augie?
I heard.
page 15 is which department? Let me see.
Police department.
Speak up.
No, yeah,
Police,
please.
okay. All right, okay, thank you. I just,
Thank you.
then, question on page 33, is that, it's a kind of 15K. This is Hillside. Are we now paying the actual?
Yeah, that, as the question came up at the last meeting,
Yeah.
we paid for the property from one of the property owners. I had sent you an email, I think it was 14,000 and change for one of the other property owners.
This is one of them. Okay.
This is one of them, yeah.
Okay.
Like I mentioned, there are 3 properties that we need to acquire. We've purchased 2 through direct negotiation, and we have to engage in a friendly condemnation with the church because of the legality of how they're established. Not that they're not legal, but just the.
Thank you, Dan.
Anybody else? I'd like a motion, please.
So moved.
Second,
Augustino.
Trustees Winstrup,
yes.
Natchez,
Yes.
Lucas,
Yes.
DeFour,
Yes.
Mayor Murphy.
Aye, thank you. Next item on the agenda is acceptance of donations. This one is a bench at Harbor Island Park. Mr. Robert Lasagna and Miss Lisa and Zizi Lasagna are desirous of donating a bench to plaque the Village of American Harbor Island Park for residents to enjoy. We would be happy to accept this generous gift of that family. Thank you very much. The gift is $1,775. I will make a motion to accept the generous gift.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The next is another gift of Mrs. Jacqueline Miranda is donating a gift in memory of Michael Miranda, $1,775. We thank her very much for remembering her relative in such a kind way that the village residents can enjoy for generations. Would anybody else like to make that motion?
So moved.
Second,
All in favor?
aye.
Thank you very much, folks. And the next item on the agenda is another donation to the Marine Education Center. Oh, it's a nice donation. $2,400 from Mr. Samuel Berg.
Nice.
And, I have touted the Marine Education Center often. If it's not just for kids, if you enjoy the marine environment around us and want to learn more, and you can learn just by going in and looking around, but we have a very trained and talented staff. Miss Kyle Troy will answer any questions you have about the Long Island Sound. And this from Mr. Berg is $2,400. Thank you very much, Mr. Berg. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved. Second,
All in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Mayor, I just wanted you to know that this is a young man who donated his bar mitzvah
Oh,
gifts.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, thank you, Sally, for telling us that. That's really kind.
Isn't that great?
It really is.
his email address tomorrow.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, could you send it to all of us?
Of course.
Thank you.
Parking space cafes. Jerry, you want to talk about this?
Mayor, this is on the agenda so we can have a discussion about the parking space cafes. Our sidewalk cafes expire on November 22nd. Typically, I wouldn't have a concern about that as we haven't had in the past, but with the parking space cafes, it seems like November 22nd might be going down the road a little too far with the parking spaces, only because I'm a snow guy and we have had snow in October, and I would hate to have that issue where we are dealing with removing concrete blocks while we're preparing for a snowstorm and all of that stuff. So I wanted to see if the board would have a discussion about ending the parking space cafes with that in mind, keeping, maybe sometime in October or in and around there.
When I was thinking about this today, I think what we might want to see is how other communities are handling this too.
Okay.
I don't want to be in a position, again, where, we're behind the 8 ball and our restaurants are not able to compete adequately.
Okay.
So can we just check, maybe Larchmont and Rye and a couple other communities that are doing this and see what their plans are?
Sure.
I can speak for Rye. They're extending it month by month.
Okay. Maybe Halloween.
Mhm.
I also wonder how much time would it take to remove the cement barriers? I mean, if
A full
you
day.
sometimes get a few days notice on a snowstorm.
Mhm.
Is this a 2-day job, a 1-day? I mean, do we know?
Oh, it's a full day to remove them with a large crew, Kelly.
Yeah, okay. And that would take them off of whatever they were doing to do this.
Yeah, preparing for snow,
Yeah.
like installing plows and other things.
Yeah.
And Jerry, can we reach out to the Chamber of Commerce too?
Okay, I'll talk to Rich.
But we do hear you, and I think if you go to them, tell them, we hear your concerns. So we're thinking about end of October, more or less.
Okay.
Some flexibility, and in line with what municipalities are doing, but you have to administer the issue, so we hear your concern.
Yeah.
I'll talk to Larchmont tomorrow, and all I know of Larchmont and Rye. I don't know of any other community that's doing this. Maybe White Plains is doing it. I don't know. I don't know that. I haven't been up there. Don't leave the house.
New Rochelle is doing it in some spots. I know Greenwich is doing it. City's definitely doing it. City's doing it all over, but we can't. City.
Okay.
I'll look around. Like I said, I tend to dine out a lot.
Okay.
Not alone. I have a young lady. Okay. Resolution adopting revised LG1 retention schedule for New York State Archives. Somebody want to explain this?
I can't explain it. Maybe Augie can.
Yes, New York State came out with a new schedule, the LG1 to replace the MU1. The Village of Mamaroneck currently uses the MU1 for all retention schedule. What the MU1 is a list of all different documents and how long we're required to keep them.
Mhm.
And all documents when we could retire them and destroy them. This list has now been superseded by the LG1, and we're asking the board to consider adopting this.
Are these documents scanned into a computer anywhere before they're destroyed?
Most of the documents before they're destroyed are scanned into the system.
What type of documents would not be?
Documents that are no longer, documents that we have now gotten to down at the Halsted facilities that have exceeded the retention period and that are not scanned will not be scanned because we are no longer required to maintain them. If we do scan them, they would exist still on our servers and we'd be paying for the backups on those as well.
Okay. This is what New York State recommends.
So
Are any of the land use records not being, that are going to,
Records are permanent documents.
It cannot be destroyed.
can you explain what some of the it may make more sense with explaining some of the records that can be destroyed, the things that don't have to be retained.
Accounts payable bills have a 7-year life. After 7 years, we no longer need to keep the hard paper copy. They can be destroyed. We don't even need to keep the digital copy any longer. That can be destroyed. Payroll records, 25 years on those. Real estate records, they're permanent. Building department records are permanent records.
Right.
They have to be maintained.
Is there like a fact sheet of the changes and why the state is doing this? Like a short summary. I don't want a 300-page document on retention, but maybe they probably have a executive summary or something short describing why they're doing this.
For one, and
So we can learn.
absolutely.
Anybody want to make a motion on this?
So moved.
Second,
Augustino?
Trustees Winstrup,
yes.
Natchez,
Yes.
Lucas,
Yes.
Before,
Yes.
Mayor Murphy.
Aye. Resolution authorization to execute a grant contract between New York State Governor Traffic Safety Committee for police overtime reimbursement. Is this for particular purpose? I think this is for drunk driving, right?
Yeah, part of the program we have it. Until it extended to the new year, we need the board to authorize it.
Okay. Any questions?
No.
I'll make the motion.
Second,
Augustino?
Trustees Winstrup,
yes.
Natchez,
Yes.
Lucas,
Yes.
Before,
Yes.
Mayor Murphy.
Okay, this was the next item on the agenda is a resolution selecting a green option with more environmentally viable sources of energy at the Village of Mamaroneck default energy selection from the Village of Mamaroneck's option in the Community Choice Aggregation Program, which the village has been a part of. They came to our last work session, or no, they came to our last regular meeting and gave us a presentation. Does anybody have any questions or concerns?
No, their presentation was excellent. They've really done a great job. Residents should know if they don't want to participate, they absolutely do not have to, but I really, hats off to Sustainable Westchester. What a great group.
I agree. And I just want to point out that when I was on the town board, Nancy Seligson was very involved in Westchester County in getting this going. So I want to give kudos to my ex-colleague, Supervisor Seligson, who really, in her whole municipal career, has always been on the cutting edge of environmental initiatives. So we need a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Augustino?
Trustees Winstrup,
Yes.
Natchez,
Yes.
Lucas,
Yes.
Before,
Yes.
Mayor Murphy.
Aye. All right, that brings us to the end of today's festivities. This is an AP meeting for minor items. I wish everybody a good rest of summer. Happy Labor Day. I'll see you all anon. Need a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Night.
Good evening.
Night.
Good night. Have a good one.